lose them? It's 7. Please join me in pledge allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to thank all the people for being here. You care about your government. That's a good thing. We do attendance, please.
Bob Ron,
Here.
Christine Rains. Here. Todd Rabel,
Here.
Daryl Kramer, Rob C.,
Here.
Patrick Beadle, Denny Moeller, Tammy Davis, Caitlin Sturworth.
Okay. Next order of business is approval of the minutes.
Unless anybody's got anything, I'll move to approve the minutes as written.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the minutes as written. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
It's been regularly moved and seconded. Any additional discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Passed. We have a hearing. It is case number 0920-2023-RZ-01. It's for Ashley and Amanda Meyer. It's a petition for rezoning residential R3 to local business LB on 3022 Pearl Street in Oldenburg. Is Ashley or Amanda
I believe the floodplain zone as it exists mimics the 2014 FEMA flood mapping. So as you look at this, this is a town of Laurel that you see up on our GIS. In any area that you do not see any hatching is considered floodplain district. So with that, you have certain things that are applicable to a floodplain district, what you can and can't do. However, there should be, in my opinion, an underlying zoning district that goes along with that. So for instance, you have A1, you have A2, R1, R3, local business, general business, and so on. Industrial, whatever it might be. So, and the reason why I bring this to your attention is within our code, there's I have a client that wants to put in a campground, and campgrounds typically fall along creeks, rivers, streams, what have you. There's one definition that allows for a campground to go in a floodplain district. And then there's one definition where an RV park is not permitted, but they're about the same thing. So wanting to try to bring this to people's, or to the board's attention to see what their thoughts are about this. So with looking at this map, this is the town of Laurel. You can see, sorry, the refresh rate isn't that great here on the screen as you look at it, but I'll zoom in close enough so you can see some detail here. Floodplain district, what does it mean? So in here you see darker yellow right there. That's a R3 designation. The lighter yellow is some other type of designation of residential, either an R1 or R2. And then you have a light blue that looks like it could be general business. Darker blue might be local business, so on. So when you go to flip on 2014 floodplain, you'll see, well, in this instance, it overlaps even more into a residential district. So floodplains change, and that's why I'm suggesting, do we want to have an overlay control what's going on, or do we want to call this a residential district and let FEMA or IDNR have jurisdiction over what happens in those areas? So what I'm speaking of is our zoning code dictates that we have to have 2 feet above the base flood elevation for a 100-year flood. And so that in order to build your finished floor or your construction of your home has to meet certain criteria in order to gain flood insurance through FEMA. I think that should control versus putting a designation of floodplain. So I had a person come to me in the town of Laurel. It's right in here in this bend right here. I checked into his site. He wants to build apartments. Floodplain says it's this elevation. He can't build unless he gets up to that elevation. He could do the necessary work to build where he needs to, but I just have a problem with this designation the way it is, and I don't understand why that designation is there. I don't know if anybody else on the board can explain to the nature of what that designation means. Why we have it, or can we get clarity on certain areas, what can be done in those districts?
Well, back when we redid the code, there were maps in my memory, that there was underlying zones underneath the floodplain. Be it as it may, we don't seem to have any record of that, and we have a hole. So what I propose is that we have a committee get together and put up a proposal, or different members bring their own proposal for different places at our next meeting, so that we can move along with putting in a zone underneath that. Our code even says floodplain overlay, which means it's something extra for those areas. But we don't have any record of anything of what the zones were underneath that. So I would recommend that we either get a committee or even independent members bring their ideas, and that we discuss this in depth at our next meeting, where we should have what zones in preparation for moving that on to the commissioners at some point. I think this is a major thing that's going to take more than 1 or 2 meetings. When we get down to the details of where we want different zones, people are going to have to be notified. And that's going to be a major undertaking.
Some areas seem to be obvious. So for instance, as you look up the Sains Creek Branch, Sains Creek Road, that area there has a floodplain district along it, matches the FEMA map perfectly. Everything around it's an A2. That's going to be an obvious choice. I think that's probably what it always has been zoned as. But when you get in and around the towns, that's where it becomes a little more difficult, I think, to try to come to those determinations on how to. And I think what you should look at is what the use is, what it might have been. Does it get into looking at comprehensive planning? I don't know. That's the thing that you have to consider. What does our comprehensive plan say currently for these areas? So that's going to be I think the real challenge. And I don't understand the implication of a zoning district either as far as taxation. What does that mean? Does that have any impact on their what they pay in tax rate?
Your taxes are based on what the use is.
What the use is?
If the use is farm and it's industrial and it's taxed as farmland, but if it's industrial and it's used industrial, it's taxed as industrial.
Okay.
So it really doesn't have any difference on the taxes, but as in any rezone, all the neighbors and all the people involved will have to be notified. So this is a very major undertaking. We have to consider what we need to do and what we want to do. And then we're going to have to figure out what the public wants us to do. We're going to have to look at the comprehensive plan. Yeah, I agree. There's certain things that seem obvious to us, but the owner or the neighbors may have a different idea. And especially when you get near any of the towns that are along the floodplains. Unless we can find that those areas were already zoned.
Have you
Would-
checked the towns at all to see if they have any records? Like Laurel, for example?
No, I have not.
What was the question?
Like the towns that are on the edge of this, do they have any records maybe anywhere? I don't know where you've looked. for records.
I'm not really certain. I know Laurel has been advocating that they don't have as bad as flooding problem as what these maps indicate, and they're wanting to seek help with DNR, FEMA to see if that can be changed. And I know at the State House, they've been having a drainage task force talking about these sort of things, very same things. I went last month to a meeting and they just had one today. I didn't make it, but they've got one more yet this month to talk about how DNR is changing floodplains and not notifying people. It's a big deal. So, the reason why I asked that is I'll bring one more thing to the table here and kind of leave it at that, but I do think it's something that we should talk about. Getting clarification on, or trying to at least designate what's possible in that area. So bear with me for a second. I have to find it where it's at. I didn't have it pulled up. Campgrounds. So this is what we have currently on our code regarding that. And I'll try to zoom this out so everybody can read it a little better from their seat here. This is all that we have. So you have recreational vehicle trailer, vehicle portable unit designed for travel, camping, recreation. RV park, tract land developed in compliance with this code for short-term occupancy recreational vehicle only. Then talk about floodplain district. Says that you can have it in an area for 180 days. Talks about the design of a recreational vehicle. So here's the first real thing about an RV park. Approval by class 3 conditional use. Hearing A1, A2, RE, LB, GB, and PB. Strikes it A1 or I1 and I2. Nothing about a floodplain. Says all the other requirements that's needed. And they talk about a HD district or whitewater scenic district. Personal camping. You're allowed to set up your own camp May through October. And then a public camp. Here it comes along and says you can put it in floodplain. So there's no real good definition what a public camp is. But it's allowed in a floodplain. So I'm wanting to get some clarity, definition, what's permitted, what's not. Because when a person goes through setting up a campground, it's a pretty significant expense. This all has to go through the Indiana Department of Health. They regulate campgrounds in all the aspects, the design of it, the public health, safety, water, electric, campsite numbers for 911 purposes, on-site sewage, if that's what they're using, or if it's a public sewage, they regulate every bit of it. And it's a very detailed plan, and it costs a lot of money. So my concerns are, if a person wants to put one in and you have these kind of ambiguities in your code and you try to come through a class 3 hearing, and then all of a sudden it gets hung up because you have these definitions that aren't very clear. What sticks, what doesn't. And when you don't have that kind of clarity to bring to the table, and let's say it's very well put together, but it's not very popular with the public, that sometimes might be a hard thing for a person to have to deal with when they've done a very good job of putting everything together that meets state code and meets all the requirements. So I'm just asking ahead of time to see if we can take a look at it before somebody dives in and goes after it, because they're wanting to do not 1, but 2 campgrounds in Franklin County. And I want to make certain that this is hopefully a successful venture for them. That's basically where I'm going with it.
One idea, just throwing this out there, until we can go through everything and get the floodplain areas zoned, if that's what we decide to do, until that time, such a person in that area could come in and ask for a zoning designation prior to doing all that work for the small cost of a zoning change and find out whether it's allowed or not allowed. What's the board think of that idea? I mean, we've got it designated as floodplain, but they want to do something that's RE related. They can ask for a designation of RE. It'll still be floodplain, Or if they want a designation of A2, they could come in, if it's in the undesignated areas that we have that are just floodplain, if they want to make it A2 for whatever reason, they can ask for a zoning change there, in my opinion.
Mhm. So you're suggesting doing a zone change, then go through the conditional use? Following
Yeah, well,
immediately after.
you would want
Or
to
could it be
change, if
rolled
they knew
on?
what they were gonna do, they'd want to put a zone in there that they were allowed to do it in. I mean,
Right,
um,
but you'd have to follow it up with a hearing after that again, once it's approved. Because we
we,
got to get a zone changed, and that's approvable by the commissioners.
Yeah.
After it's sent to them with a favorable, unfavorable, or no recommendation. So it's
Yeah.
a two-step process, basically.
but your worries about them putting out a whole lot of money for a lot of other things would be, the questions would be answered before they put all that money out,
Mhm.
before any, well, the TAC committee would still want to know about stormwater drainage and all those kind of things.
Mhm.
They would, I mean, the conditional use would be based on that point. That's the only way I can see solving the short-term answer. The long-term, the real answer is to get an underlaying zoning for all that area.
Which could take some time as well.
Oh, that's a long process with as many lots as what you're talking about there. And I'm serious. You've got to notify all the people that are involved. And
So maybe it might be better just to deal with a floodplain on a case by case versus trying to change the whole county.
Changing the zone maps. I don't know when the last time that was done. So I'm trying.
that's why I say I don't have no proof of it, but I'm almost certain that there were maps where all that was zoned.
In
The whole
90
county was zoned, and then the floodplain was put over the top of it.
in 96, they were still the same as what they are today pretty well. As I've seen the 96 maps.
There was something after that where they had a floodplain and this was within, I'm sure within the last 10 years, that they redesignated some of that, what was in the floodplain and was not, and it included more acreage than it did previously.
I just don't like the floodplain because it's a moving thing. It changes all the time. And it's just a bad definition, if you ask me. So, but
Was that zoned at, I mean, you're saying it was zoned something before it was zoned into floodplain? Would that be on a deed or anything like that, or on their tax, how they were taxed initially on that property?
I don't have no proof of my allegation. He says in the 96 maps show it the way that our maps do now. So that would be the best information that I could go by, is what he says about the 96 maps. I don't know if you can go back to 65 when the zoning code was put in and find any maps or not.
haven't seen any.
I haven't seen any. So
So if a person wanted to do something, short term would be ask for the proper zoning, which most likely would be, the best thing would be to do is go to what the adjacent zoning is. That way it doesn't become spot zoning. And more times, it's going to be a A designation mostly. That's what most of our county is. Well, I advise the person to go that route if that's the route the board chooses or thinks is the best way to go.
I think it'd be the fastest.
Thanks
Okay.
for the discussion.
Moving right along.
One thing I want to add is we do, as a board, we have to remember our community is for campers and
Right.
people coming here and that's what we're about. So as we move forward, we're going to see more and more of this kind of
Mhm.
thing. So we just need to remember that. So we don't run up against this over and over and over because.
Mhm.
But that's fine. If there are things that could be made better or changing part of our code, then that would be something probably in future thing to look at. But for right now, I think that, the short term quickest cure for that. Next subject. Caitlin, removal of the index.
Terry Duffy brought this up to me. He was asking me if the page numbers on our index on the zoning code match up. And I didn't even realize the index was in there. So no, they do not match up. I was wondering if it's a necessary part of the index or a necessary part of the code moving forward. I was wondering if we could just take it out.
Take it out.
Well, I would agree with it because index will continually keep changing as amendments are happening to the zoning code. So for that reason, it's gonna be an ongoing thing to maintain, update. And given how things are digital, Control Find does things wonders for you. If you're used to doing things in that manner.
When I talked to Caitlin about this, I pointed out that every time a page number within a document changes, there's a chance that dozens of index entries are going to be wrong because they bump up and down pages. And the way that we have our ordinance presented today, it's a searchable document. So if you want to find out where campgrounds is, you're not going to go to the back and look for campgrounds and then try and find it someplace in the document. You're going to do a search for campground and then just scroll through them. So the way our document's set up right now, the index is it useless? Yeah, useless is a good word. And so we should take that out at the very least because it's of no use to anybody. And if we decide later on we need a good index, we can do one based on an ordinance that hopefully stabilizes a little bit after we're done with some more of these changes that we've been working on.
Thank you.
Is that something that we have to vote to send to the commissioners
It's safer.
as a change or how does that work?
It was adopted with the code, so that's probably the best route, even though I know it's useless and it shouldn't matter, but it was adopted with the code, so it should go through the process of changing it.
Because it's something being stricken.
So you can make a motion to advertise removal of it at the next meeting.
I think with as many things as what we've got going on with the commissioners right now and as many other things as we got going on, let's just table this for the time being. We don't need to muddy the waters more than what we already are over that.
Or if we had a lot of muddy water, it would be possible that we could get more things. We achieve more.
Maybe when there's some positive motion, might be a good time to do it.
Any additional discussion?
Ed's got a comment.
The Indiana Flood Control Act, IC 1428-1. The act provides that it is illegal to construct a permanent place of residence in a floodway. Any other structure, obstruction, deposit, or excavation of floodway in any stream in the state must be approved by the commission. That's the state Indiana Flood Control Commission.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's most likely regarding construction within a floodway. Floodplain, yeah, and that's what our code references is anything within the floodplain that's designated by, right now it's DNR and FEMA. That's the debate at the State House right now. The DNR's floodplain maps are overreaching, I think is what they're talking about. They're trying to map them better than what FEMA has, but there's been no due process or notice to those people that have changed. So you are right. The state of Indiana does regulate that, and then, but it comes through our local level here first and then goes on up to them for approval finally. Because there's a community acknowledgement form that has to be signed when there's any kind of construction that happens in that area.
Only thing it currently built would be grandfathered in.
That's correct. Well, if they take out a loan, they have to do some special things too.
Back to our discussion about removal of the index. I think, Daryl, were you going to make a motion that we table this?
Table this. I move that we table that discussion about the index.
Is there a
till a later
second?
date.
I'll second.
You did?
He motion removed, I second.
Okay, it's been regularly moved and seconded that we table the removal of the index. Any additional discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. It's tabled.
I think there'll be a better time to bring it up.
The next item is for Caitlin also. It's setbacks.
This came up last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago at the BZA meeting. I just would like to at least ask you guys if there is a rule about where the setback begins. Does it begin at the property line or does it begin at the road's edge? In the industrial section, our zoning code clearly says that it starts at the edge, but that is just in the industrial zone. So I was wondering if it could be clearly stated in the rest of the code somewhere, or if you guys could give me some direction as to where the setback would start.
We did the middle of the road on that petition, didn't we? Last week or week before? Did we use the middle of the road?
No, they use the edge of
That's,
the road.
that's what mine is.
Edge of the road?
So there's a problem with using the edge of the road because the edge of the road is constantly changing. Shays Road is an example right now, as all that traffic goes down. They're adding blacktop and they're adding feet and it's getting wider. So then that setback would constantly change. So I don't know if the edge of the road is a good.
The middle would change too if the whole road is changing. You know, both, you got that from both directions.
Yeah, the middle gets on the curve, goes wider to the right and then wider to the left and the middle changes, so.
And when the
How do
flood comes
they-
and washes it away, then the road moves back too. So
I mean, it's always been the edge of the road. So I mean, if they're splitting hairs and we're going, if we're measuring from the edge and going at the minimum setback, we're back to that discussion we had a couple weeks ago.
So can we, Tammy, can we do, like Todd said, can we do all our business from the edge of the road?
I mean, I would say that's kind of how we voted and this, and at least it's industrial. It is in our code somewhere, even though it's not ideal. If we do any future code changes to the commissioners at some point, whenever that good time is, maybe put that somewhere else in our code that we use that as our general standard. But I think we have enough to go on to do that in the future until that changes.
So if someone comes in tomorrow and asks, if we decide it should be the edge of the road, and someone comes in tomorrow, can Caitlin say it's the edge of the road?
I think we've set some precedents to do that, yes.
Then I would
but not a bad idea to put it in the code elsewhere, Caitlin, in the future,
Yeah.
whenever we decide to make some changes.
I mean, of all my years staking houses out, I was always told the edge of the road. Now I go out there and I find the edge of the blacktop. Am I 45 feet most of the time or whatever the minimum setback? No, I usually go beyond that, but now, could somebody get in trouble for doing that? The right person gets a hold of it, maybe.
If you maintain the edge of the road as the basis of your setback when there's no defined right of way versus a center line, that will make the setback more stringent as far as how far back off the road you need to be. However, most places I've ever seen have always done it from either the center line of the road or from the right of way if there's an established right of way.
Is the property owners owned to the center of the road in the county at most places? mean-
It's typically to the center of a road or to a section line. And section lines tend to follow the center of the road, not always.
So
So
if the
it's based-
setback was pulled from the center of the road, it would be, the house could be closer. So if we're going at the edge of the road with the setback, we're back farther.
You're back
than-
further, correct. It,
Yeah.
it would be more more restrictive, the house can't be any closer.
Yeah.
Because of that reason. So it would be the safer bet if you were to maintain that. However, given the configuration of a lot, it could be maybe mean the size of a house being a little smaller depending on the size of that lot. Based off your rear and side setbacks.
So unofficially, can we make that something that we're gonna an unofficial rule that we'll work by? It's from the edge of the road, and then we will try, when we present things to the commissioners, they have that adopted also.
There again, without a survey,
Right.
what are you pulling from?
The edge of the road?
That's what I'm saying. That's the way it's always been, is the edge of the road. But if you're gonna change it, you
No, I
gotta
mean,
go, if, in the future, I'm saying, if we change it, the only thing you can change it to, in my mind, is a survey line. To be adequate.
and I think,
So I think the edge of the road's been there for the last 40 years that I know of. So,
But in Chris's example, though, the roads are widening and then that person becomes even more restricted because of that reason.
yeah,
So
edge of the road.
yeah, I think edge of the road.
usually,
but-
usually in other places I've seen, the basis comes off the center line because of a surveyed line on the center of the road where common ownership is. However, like you said, sometimes that's not surveyed, so where is the true center and things like that, so.
The road shifted over the years. It's-
It becomes a conundrum sometimes to determine that kind of thing.
So our setback will be from the edge of the road. Good. Moving on. Septic requirements in the zoning code, since the state changed the rules, saying that we could no longer require two septic sites. We need to do, I guess, to observe those changes in our code. Because it still says two septic sites.
We advertised for this for a public hearing,
Yes.
so it's a public hearing.
Okay. So we will have a public hearing sometime. Right now.
Today, it's.
Right
advertised
now.
tonight.
We
This-
advertise this for this meeting.
We'll do it
Right now.
Okay. Public, what do you think? Anybody's on Zoom, I'll ask you, you can respond now too.
storing sites and all that. That's the other part of it.
So
You know,
everywhere,
so you gotta have a septic site and it may take more than 1 acre. I mean, you can only have 1 acre, but it may take more than 1 acre.
I think that the absence of language regarding septic or state minimum standard is not a good thing. We have to have something in the code stating that. Otherwise,
so
people
strike,
want to divide and not have to go through that process. and they'll do whatever
Exactly,
they want.
because somebody's gonna say, well, I sold an acre of ground, didn't say it had to have a septic on it.
Right.
strike where it says 2 and put 1. Just change the 2s to 1.
That's what the state's mandating at this point.
Septic for 1 acre.
Yes.
So they wouldn't get their health permit to build a house unless they have a septic site, correct?
Correct.
Yes, but that doesn't mean somebody couldn't sell them the lot and then they turn around and say, well, I thought it was approved.
Well, I could
Yeah.
buy an acre lot next to me unapproved if I wanted to make my yard bigger.
You can, but they can't advertise as a building lot if they don't have a septic. And if we don't have wording, they can say, well, we didn't have to say that it said a septic site. I think it needs to be in there to protect people.
In some counties, they make you say whether the lot's buildable or not buildable.
Yeah,
And those are some of the underlying reasons why you label it that way.
hmm
Um,
I mean, I've been on a site 15 acres and we found one site to build put a septic on.
there's land like that out there.
Yeah. So. I don't know. I think the wording needs to be in there for somehow protecting people when they're buying a building lot.
So if it's just stated minimum lot area, 1 acre or larger, needed 1 septic field, or not exactly, but in all these places, you need a septic field.
You can send proposed changes
That's
along with
what
your
we're in
recommendation.
Building for dwellings.
Yeah.
So you would want to do possibly a no recommendation with these changes.
If we're just changing the language here in this for dwellings,
Okay, this B1 is minimum lot size and it's 1 acre or larger if needed for 2 septic fields where no sewer is utilized. If you go from 2 septic fields to 1 septic field,
Yeah.
leave the rest of the stuff the way it is, just put 1 septic field, minimum 1 acre, and problem solved by
Yeah.
the least.
Change your 2 to
Changes.
1.
Yeah. Yes,
I'm not familiar with this requirement to change from 2 to 1, but is there a provision in there that allows you to beef up the requirements for the existing site? I mean, the idea of having 2 instead of 1 is that if 1 fails, you got another one. And I'm concerned that a lot of these sites that are being approved might not be good enough for the long run. And I was wondering if it's possible to beef up the requirements. You know, more line, perimeter drain, dosing tanks. I mean, a lot of ground in Franklin County doesn't drain very well. And it seems like if we're gonna go to 1 site per lot, that we need to make sure it's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, the dose tanks are required by the county health department if the soil's poor or if you've got a 4-bedroom home or larger typically. So, you know, on that sites. And then they go by the footage of septic field also, so that depending on the size home they want to build on that, their septic site has to increase in size. So I don't know whether you require bigger lots, which I don't know that that's always the best thing to do, but the stormwater, perimeter drains, downspout lines, hard surface, all that comes into play.
But to answer your question, Terry, the bill that passed in July seems to mandate this. Not saying it's a good idea. I'm just saying that's what the state's saying we need to do. So I don't know, like you said, if we're changing the lot size is another way to try to have a backup area or not, but that's up to the board.
Yeah, I mean, all they're saying is we can't make them test for two. They're not saying we have to keep 1 acre, you know, they can't require that. I don't think the state can, but that's up to the zoning boards.
Does the state allow the septic field to be dug up and reused?
I am
In some
being,
areas of the country, I know that is done.
our old leach fields, from what I'm being told, some of them, if they were spaced wide enough, you can go down the center, but most guys are telling me that when you do that, that ground's contaminated enough that the health department probably won't pass it. Now, I mean, it depends on the soils, but I mean, let's face it, or not most, but a lot of the counties clay soil that won't absorb anything.
Clay and rocks.
So I don't know. I think we need to watch what we do. I mean, we've all seen what's going on in some subdivisions where there's a bunch of 1 acre lots and the water runoff is a big problem of the septic's failing. So it all comes hand in hand in my book.
I believe we should add into the code at least one testing for one septic field per dwelling unit. However, I do feel that there's some other still underlying things where it says, for instance, like R2, 2-family residence, B1, lot area, single family home, manufactured homes where no sewers utilize 16,000 square feet. That doesn't meet any kind of state requirement either. Can't have a lot 16,000 square feet and put a septic field on it for multifamily home. It's gotta be an acre. You know, I don't think any lot's approvable unless it's 1 acre with septic. That's the minimum by state. Are we gonna go less than that? You look at the R1. It says 1 acre. You go to R3, they let you go down to 10,000 square feet.
So if we do like Bob says and take out the number 2 and put one septic field there. For instance, on the A1, minimum lot area, 1 acre or larger if needed for one septic field where no sewer is utilized. We would fall in line with the law. If you need 15 acres to have your one septic system, that's how big it has to be.
Right.
So do we have a consensus to that? I'll move that motion if that's.
Thank you. We have a motion to,
R2 though, you're saying that we're not, lot size not big enough there because it doesn't say 1 acre?
That's my idea. You know, R3, it says it goes down to, has single family home, 10,000 square feet. 2-family homes is 20,000 square feet. The lot size still isn't big enough. It doesn't meet any kind of compliance to our code. It's contradictory.
But they're not gonna get a septic for that many bedrooms.
They're not, but I mean,
In
the
that
language is wrong.
Yeah,
It's-
we gotta
it's-
redo the language, but right now for the septic part,
Yeah, I mean, changing it to 1 definitely makes us compliant with the state, but
let me
I'm
start.
just pointing out that there's other underlying
Right.
issues.
We need
Yeah,
to,
we should correct all the other underlying issues while we're doing this.
Are we,
I don't think we advertised to change the area of the lots. All we advertised for was
So-
about sewers.
let's get
Okay, we got a
compliant with the
motion.
state where it says 1, and then we'll come back and do the rest
we have
later.
a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Been regularly moved and seconded that we change it from 2 sites to 1. The other verbiage remains the same. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Passed.
So do we need a motion to forward that to the commissioners with a favorable recommendation with one? Is that what the motion?
I thought it was.
That's
That's
what the motion would be.
Okay. Just making sure we cover all the bases here.
So should we do another part or just let that go till our next hearing when we bring the other part that Daryl,
Or do
that we
have-
have tabled?
Other parts are voluntary. This is state mandated, so I think we need to move on that one for certain.
Yeah, if you guys want to think about or discuss the other avenues that you were just discussing, you can certainly put it on the agenda to discuss at the next meeting if you wanted.
I mean, for tabling the other things with the, like the index and this, I think it's stuff we should keep in our log to do at some point once we start seeing some positive motion.
We can bring all that up at a later, but we need to move on.
Thank you. Next item is property line setbacks, specifically in towns. Caitlin.
This is just a continuation of the conversation. It's just a continuation of the conversation that we had at our last regularly scheduled meeting. I did contact Nicole Daly from Dearborn County. And I included her email in the binder on what she does in those situations where the GIS is wrong. So I just put it on the agenda again so we could continue the conversation.
Anything else to come before this board? Want to thank you, the audience, for being here, and people that are on Zoom also listening. Thank you for participating in your government.
I'm going to, before we do that, we've got the violations. And we have some serious stuff going on in the county. What are we doing about the violations? Are we just kind of in hold on them, or?
A lot of them just received letters from Tammy. And then a lot of the newer ones are just going to Kurt because of the new commissioner's nuisance ordinance.
Okay.
So we've heard back from handful
Mm-hmm,
from my letters.
mm-hmm.
So
Sounds
hopefully-
like mostly by winter they'll
Mhm.
be cleaning up.
Yeah, I sent out several recently.
So that is going from our hands to the commissioners,
Some of
Not
it.
always.
pretty much, most of the time.
If it's junk and things like that, yes. But not the ones that we currently have. The ones we currently have are being handled by me and Tammy.
Very good. Anything else to come before this board? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll
I'll
second.
move
Unless you
to
want to stay
adjourn.
here.
second
Been
it.
moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.